The voice of Husker Nation is on the air. This is Hail Varsity Radio. Insight, opinion, expertise, along with the biggest names talking Nebraska sports. Join in with the show at 402-489-1240 or 1-800-825-5865. Now, here are your hosts, Chris Schmidt and Elijah Herbel.
Welcome to It Mondays here at Hail Varsity Radio. We are presented by Currency for all of your equipment financing needs. Go Currency. One more day. Schmitty is away. He'll be back on a Tuesday edition of Hail Varsity Radio. Last I checked, he was somewhere in western Iowa. So Godspeed, Schmitty, as he returns from the weekend of baseball out in eastern Iowa. Haven't gotten a report. The most up-to-date information I had was from Saturday. Sounds like the little guy was doing well out there. Wanted to be on the mound just a little bit more, but it was a good weekend for the team, and we'll get a full report from Schmitty tomorrow. So today I'm joined in studio by Brady Oltmans. So we heard from Brady on Friday, got an extended sit-down recruiting chat. Brady kind enough to come and sit down with us here on a Monday edition of Hail Varsity Radio. You can find and follow Brady on Twitter, as always, Brady Oltmans, and we're looking forward to a fun show today. Brady, how are you doing on a Monday?
I'm doing well, man. The radio don't have no recruiting dead period, so I'm out here putting in my miles on the airwaves. But it's good to be here and good to be escaping the heat. Dog and I weren't too big fans of it before coming in, so happy to spend it in some air conditioning here with you.
Yeah, speaking of the heat, it was a rough weekend for me on the baseball diamond.
Ooh.
It wasn't as hot as like some other games I've had, but like, man, it got to me. It was a warm weekend despite the fact high of 87 degrees. That's not bad. But with the humidity, which it feels like July in Nebraska. I guess that's the simplest way to put it.
I'm going to say, towards the end of last week, it was, super nice, truly blessed. I recognize that. But then, when you texted me last night, and then I thought about the weather this last week, and I was like, oh, boy, yeah, that would have just punished you if you were out there and all that gear and everything just sitting in front of that sun. It was just... yeah, kind of big no bueno for me. So props to you for putting your money's worth and earning those dollars.
Yeah. Ooh, that's why they pay us the big bucks, Brady. That's just what they say about high school baseball umpires. They give us the big bucks.
That's right, baby.
But we got a fun show planned for you today. If you want to chime in with the show, again, you can always give us a call, 402-489-1240. That's the line to get directly through to us. We'll get you on the air. You can also send us a tweet. Ready laid it out at Brady Oltmans for Brady, at Herbel Essences for me, Elijah Herbel, and then you can also tweet at the show at HVarsity Radio. All great ways if you want to connect through Twitter. You can send an email if you like. I'm not great about checking my email during this show, but I'll see what I can do. I'll give it a couple checks for you guys. But I know Schmitty always checks his email. He'll forward it to me. Worst case scenario, that is Chris@HailVarsity.com, so you can send him an email. Also, the YouTube stream. Yep. We stream live there every single day. It's the Hail Varsity YouTube page. There's a whole comment section. I know we have friends that tend to chime in every single day, and I'm talking about you, Moonbot. We got Matthew. We got Crew. I don't want to forget anybody here. Oh, man.
That's why you don't start individually
naming people in the stream chat. Anyway, a full cast of characters that tends to chime in on the Hail Varsity YouTube page. You can join that crew. I know Livy Dunn at one point did comment on the YouTube stream, despite the fact that it was just one of our regular listeners who changed their entire YouTube profile. All I'm saying is it's a big place for people to come chime in. So find us on YouTube, the Hail Varsity YouTube page. Just search Hail Varsity, and it should be at the top of the Hail Varsity page. So you can chime in with the show that way as well. But yeah, Twitter preferred method. We got a fun show planned though today as first hour completely open. We've got plenty to get into, a big weekend of news, especially with the Northwestern football program. We'll get into that here in just a second, as well as Brice Matthews, Max Anderson, and now this afternoon, Emmett Olson, all off the board in the MLB Draft. We'll get into where they ended up and what that means for the Husker baseball program. And then in next hour, it's going to be a Blackshirt Hour 2, as we've come to expect on Mondays. Charlie McBride joins us at 5:05, and then we'll have Jay Moore join us for an extended sit-down, 5:25 and 5:40. Jay Moore joins us as we'll get into the Northwestern situation just a little bit with Jay. He's a guy that played high-level football in a multitude of different locker rooms, and we're going to get into Jay's take on what's going on at Northwestern, what he thinks that means for Pat Fitzgerald. So all that is coming your way in Hour 2. But where we started off, Brady, is with the Northwestern football situation, because we got into this a little bit in our first segment Friday with Schmitty and a little bit with Bill as well on Friday, not knowing the full scope of the situation. And basically our take was hazing in 2023 can be a bit of a buzzword. It can be one of those words that can mean a lot or it can mean a little, but whenever the word hazing gets thrown into something, it immediately sets people's alarms off and go, okay, this isn't okay. But our take was, let's wait and see what the scope of this is, because this could have easily been a situation that's been blown out of proportion. You have a disgruntled player, and the seniors, as a prank, the beginning of fall camp, they made all the freshmen drink a gallon of milk and run around the track for a mile. We're going to call that hazing. Is that technically considered hazing? Yes. Is it to a level where you think, man, a coach should be fired for not knowing this is going on? Probably not. That was where we were at on Friday. Now we sit here after some great reporting from the Daily Northwestern. It's the student-run newspaper at Northwestern. They have a great journalism program there, and they showed why this weekend. A phenomenal story. I encourage you to check it out. Again, the Daily Northwestern, they had 4 writers come together on this story because it was such an important story, and really dove into what was going on at Northwestern, and that includes hazing that was on the line of sexual assault. You have a lot of instances of freshmen being forced not only to be sexually, I guess it's on that line, but I'm going to call it sexually assaulted here, and then also to be forced into just sexually gross acts with other freshman teammates. You have a culture that just feels like there was no control from Pat Fitzgerald over his football program, what was going down in the locker room. And it's led a lot of former players and current players to be disgruntled with that program. And all in all, I think the college football world, and especially the Big Ten world, has been surprised, if not shocked, by what they've seen from this Northwestern football program, simply because Pat Fitzgerald was not the guy that you expected to run a football program that would allow this to happen. Pat Fitzgerald's guy always had what seems to be a tight-knit football program that plays football the right way. They're tough, they're physical, they're what you really define up until the past 2 seasons or so as a Big Ten football program. They have their academics in order. Their football team plays a brand of football that you've come to expect from Northwestern. They're buttoned up. If you make a mistake, they're going to capitalize on it. Pat Fitzgerald, just all in all, from what we've seen from the outside, is just a damn good football coach, and you expected him to have a better grasp of what's going on in the locker room, regardless if he knew what was going on or not, which remains in question right now. We'll get into that here in just a second. But Brady, I want to turn this over to you and get your reaction to what we are seeing within the Northwestern football program, because I don't think I am alone in my shock with how devious some of this was.
Yeah, and I'm with you. It's one of those instances where things come out right away, and you really don't. In my history of journalism, the story will continue to come out. You know, there very seldom is like the full broad scope of the entirety that comes out in one fell swoop in the singular first reported story. A lot of times it is just that first story, and then people feel more comfortable to add their experiences and their voice, and they want their voices to be heard and their experiences to be heard and seen in cases like this. And there is like an element to the kind of wait, see what comes out, because not too long ago, the Nebraska softball team, Rhonda was put on leave while they investigated, and the school had investigated allegations into them. Certainly not at the similar level, not comparing the two, just simply saying there was an investigation, and then they cleared up, and Rhonda's retained, kind of validated, her standing with everything.
Or I go to as far back as Leach in his time down at Texas Tech, where it was James. I can't remember the kid's first name, but James,
it was Craig James's young son.
Yes, where
was it Craig James Jr. actually?
That could be right, actually.
Yeah.
Anyway, there was allegations of mistreatment following concussion, where he was treated poorly because he wasn't willing to practice, and they locked him in an electrical closet, and he was unable to leave. And as time went on, it turns out that Craig James Jr. was a little bit ostracized from the football program because he didn't quite take it as seriously as some other guys. And whenever he got a concussion, the football team said, okay, you need to not practice. We're not gonna allow you to come on the football field. What we're gonna do is we're gonna put you in a dark area where you're gonna have low stimulants, which is actually the protocol for whenever you come back for a concussion. So yeah, that's kind of where we were coming from on Friday. Let's wait to see what the details are here, because we don't know the full scope of the story. Now it's come out, it's been backed up by multiple sources, and you look at it and you just say, wow.
Yeah, it's just heinous. I mean, you think about these things of like, and I'm sure we'll get in with Jay Moore about this more from like the football and the cultural aspect on the football team of how does this even become a factor? How does this even become a possibility within you're trying to build a cohesive unit? How does this conducive to that? I just don't understand it, and I don't know if I ever will. But in my history, and going back to like covering sports back in Wyoming, I had the unfortunate experience of having to cover some bullying and some similar issues among teams, among high school teams there. And of course, high school sports is a little bit different than college sports. This is certainly not going to equate the level of Northwestern football team and high school sports out in Wyoming, but you just see it's all just the dehumanizing nature of trying to share dominion over one person and another. That I just can't wrap my brain around it. I don't understand how that's supposed to build the team together. And I know, Elijah, you and I both played football, and the closest thing to hazing I can remember on my team was you'd have your freshmen carry pads of the seniors. But even then, I distinctively remember when I was a senior, like, we didn't want that to be a thing because, of course, we were playing 8-man football, and like you had such small numbers that it was like it wasn't so much a senior versus freshman because you really needed the freshmen to be just as part of the team as the seniors were, and you kind of phase that out. There's I don't know. It just seems like there's certainly varying degrees of it, and like team building, team bonding, and everything like that. This certainly it's like, I don't even know how this even becomes a thought of like this is going to be something that we do in the sake of teamwork and camaraderie, because the line just, once you step over certain lines, it just becomes so grotesque and awful that lives are forever altered for it in some cases. And I
mean, we're talking freshmen in college. These are 18-year-olds. The brain's not fully developed. You're still in a lot of cases figuring out who you are as a person and trying to find your way into a monumental life step where you're going off to college and completely different life experience. And as you said, it can mold you.
Well, and you think about it from like the recruiting aspect of like you're going in and taking official visits, unofficial visits, and you're being recruited by this school for 2.5, 3 years, sometimes 4 in these cases, especially if you're a big standout. And then, you're welcome. They're trying to build this welcoming environment for you. And the minute you step on campus, the guys are trying to wrap their arms around you and trying to build like, here's what it's going to be like when you're here. But then once you're actually like in a part of it and you're going through the practice, the difficulties of practice, because college football is so drastically different from high school football. The intensity level's different. The class demands are different. The demands that the coaching staff has on you are different. And the study hall habits and the actual time you spend on football is completely different, to the point where you need to lean on your teammates and your friends to help you get through that adjustment, because this is a new environment and a change. And then something like this happens. You're such a weird, vulnerable place at that age, going into a new environment like that on a big stage like that, playing Big Ten football. It just seems like I don't want to call it predatory, but like it just seems like it's a very vulnerable position that those kids are caught in, and the upperclassmen who should know better expose that vulnerability. You know what I mean? And that's among the many abhorrent aspects of this story as it's been reported so far. That's certainly one that stands out to me upon reading it just and sitting with it a couple days later.
And I think another place that my mind goes to is, how much did Pat Fitzgerald know? Because you as a head football coach need to have the finger on the pulse of your entire team, the locker room. And the story says that there's a whiteboard in the locker room that was essentially dedicated to creating lists of who is going to be hazed, where it would say it was Shrek's list, which is essentially the list of people who are next to be ran, which is involving gross, dry humping-esque activities. You're being held down by seniors, being forced into things that you don't want to do. And the fact that the coaching staff claims, hands off, we didn't know what was going on, to me is very suspicious. You need to have a sense of what's going on in your locker room, whether it's going and talking to a senior, hey, I saw this whiteboard, what the hell does this mean? Or you going to a GA and saying, hey, you were here a couple years ago, what does this whiteboard mean? The fact that Pat Fitzgerald either didn't care to know what was going on in his locker room or intentionally turned a blind eye is very, very concerning to that football program, because I don't think that a head coach of Pat Fitzgerald's stature and how good we know he is had no idea what was going on. That to me is hard to believe, and I guess we'll wait for the facts to come out in this story. But regardless of whether he knew or not, it's a sign of a lack of control of your football program if you don't know what's going on in your own locker room.
Yeah, it comes on the institutional aspect. You have to think Pat Fitzgerald had to know something like that was happening. If it's happening at that frequency, and if it is on the whiteboard there where he is, in the locker room with the team, at what point do you look at that and say, what is that? Like, ooh, how many times we've watched Shrek today kind of thing? Like, you've got to know. You have to know. And to that point, the administration has to know. Because going back to, they're doing an investigation now. I believe it is ongoing. But to place Pat Fitzgerald on a 2-week pay, on basically a vacation without pay during this dead period for 2 weeks, when he's missing nothing, it's a slap in the face. It is. And I know that when the administration came out with a statement late Friday, they said that they're going to reconsider his, terms of his suspension or whatever. But you've got to know. You've got to look into this and be aware that the optics of just that alone and that initial suspension are not good. And you have to be aware enough of the situation itself, and you have to communicate with people in part of the investigation to say, like, just give me a number between 1 and 10. How serious is this? And do we place him on indefinite suspension or whatever? It's institutional failure from Pat Fitzgerald and then everybody else above him that even their response to this investigation and these allegations have gotten to this point, because it is in 2023, none of this should have happened at all. And then to see the administration fumble it from Fitzgerald on upward into a culture that could potentially harbor such behavior is ridiculous for me to even think about.
It's Brady Oltmans. I'm Elijah Herbel. It's Hail Varsity Radio. We'll continue on with this conversation after the break.
And now, back to Hail Varsity Radio.
Continuing on here on a Monday, it's Hail Varsity Radio. We're presented by Currency, Elijah Herbel, and Brady Oltmans taking you through the show today as Schmitty drives back through the state of Iowa back to Lincoln, Nebraska. He'll be back with us on a Tuesday edition of Hail Varsity Radio. It'll be tomorrow from 4 to 6, but for now, you're stuck with me and Brady. Just kidding. As we're rolling through. You can find Brady on Twitter at Brady Oltmans and find me at Herbal Essences. That's for me, Elijah Herbel. And that's where you can connect with us. Let us know your thoughts as we discuss a little bit of the Northwestern football program, their just disturbing story that came out over the weekend, and there's more details coming out today as some former Northwestern players have described a racist environment they found in the football program, very similar to that story we heard about from Iowa over the past about 2 years, I think. Maybe it was 2 years ago, where it was their head strength coach. But Brady, all in all, I'm not sure how much you've read about the potential racist environment we've heard at Northwestern. Just something feels broken within the Northwestern football program and maybe the Northwestern athletic department as a whole.
Yeah, because it just seems like it's one of those cases where there's a fracture one way, or something is, there's just a basic fracture within the culture and the system itself, and then it just extends out. Those fissures within the program just extend out into a multitude of spaces, and it would be, it'd be easier, a lot better to say that this was an isolated incident, but cases like this happen. They just happen, and they happen far too frequently than we would like them to happen in college football. So it's, I don't know. We'll see what comes out of this situation, and as the reporting continues, how this story unfolds. It's just going to be one of those. I don't know. It's a case where things are just compiling in this case that it's not going to get any easier to swallow the entirety of this story.
Yeah, that's exactly right, and kind of one of the points that they made towards the bottom end of the story was, like, players suffered very real off the field consequences because of this, where their mental health suffered. They had players reaching out to each other because of suicidal thoughts that they're having in the middle of the night based on what they were dealing with every single day at practice. And you look at the suffering results of the Northwestern football program the past couple of years, and I think your mind has to go to the fact that this probably had something to do with it, assuming the allegations are true, and they've been backed up by so many different former and current players, that I think you have to assume that even if the full depth of the story is not true, or any sort of certain facts have been misconstrued, I think you still have to go to a place where you assume most of what you're reading, if not all of it, is the truth. And it kind of makes sense that, if you're going to have these horrible things happening in your locker room, it's not very conducive to a team going and being successful on Saturdays. And you talk about the hazing, and now the story out today from former Northwestern football players, most of them near the start of Pat Fitzgerald's tenure, saying they felt that the environment that they faced in the locker room was one that was racist in a blatant way, where in order to conform to the Wildcat way, which is kind of similar to what we heard about from Iowa a couple years ago, players that were black and players that were Hispanic didn't feel like they could be themselves, where if you had long hair, the black players with dreadlocks, they had to cut their dreadlocks off, but then the white players that have long hair, their hair was okay and it conformed to the Wildcat way. And there was one player, Ramon Diaz Jr., who went on the record with his name, which is fully credit to him. He played offensive line for Northwestern from 2005 to 2008. He said, "I didn't feel like I could be anything other than white. We never felt like we could be ourselves. We had to fit in by being white or acting white or laughing at our own people." And whenever you read all of this, you just wonder how so much of this has been swept under the rug for so long. And I guess we don't know how long the hazing's gone on for, because there was one anonymous player who went out to a different reporter on Twitter over the weekend and said he played for the football program nearly a decade ago and he didn't experience any hazing during his time at Northwestern. But regardless, I think when you combine these two stories, it very much shows a lack of control by Pat Fitzgerald and his coaching staff over his team, over his locker room. And all in all, just concerning that this is still so prevalent in modern college football.
Yeah, well, and it goes back to how do you build a team? How do you build a successful team? I mean, obviously the end goal is to win ball games, but how do you get them, even in the most callous way to think about it, you get the most out of a player that comes in if they're comfortable and they're excited and they're happy and they want to be there and they buy into everything that's happening and they're comfortable there. And they're giving everything that they can at practice to work up to levels that they previously weren't, to raise their standard continually and to be successful and to meet a potential NFL future. That's what they want. That's what every college football player wants to do, or I should say, the vast majority of college football players want to do is make it in the NFL. And I just don't see where you're going to have individualism in there. That's just the way it is. You have 100 or so, in adding walk-ons, 100 or so individuals that make up a college football team. That's just the way that it is. But you want all of those to act and move and behave as one. There is no to dehumanize or eliminate individualism from a team, but it is to make all of those individuals into one collective unit and body. And the idea that you would kind of pick and choose which individual cultures or individual backgrounds are pushed to the forefront is again, it's toxic. It's just a toxic culture, and it's a toxic mindset to have it now and in college football and in anywhere really. So it's another layer and aspect of this story that I think, again, it goes back to it takes one story, one voice to be heard, and then more people adding their voices and their experiences to really get the vastness of all of this. But I mean, right now it just doesn't look good for the university, for Pat Fitzgerald, or for anybody out in Evansville.
We go to the phone lines now, and if you're hanging on the line, I know we have a couple calls waiting. Stay right there. I'll get you in just a second. But first, we go to Chris. Chris joining Hail Varsity Radio. And Chris, what do you have for us today? Chris. Well, it appears we've lost Chris from the phone line. So, Chris, you there? Well, Chris, if you want to get on the line, give us a call back. I'll get to you here in just a second. Our call dropped for whatever reason. But yeah, you can give us a call if you'd like to get connected with the show today. Give us your thoughts on Northwestern football. 402-489-1240 is the number you go to. And I promise we'll get to some Husker football news. But Brady, it's safe to say this is not only the story of college football from the weekend, it's going to be the big story in college football probably up until Big Ten Media Days, until we're able to get some answers from Coach Fitzgerald, as he's going to be forced to meet with the media against Big Ten Media Days and have to answer some tough questions. Yeah, I mean, to be frank, we got a credential approval today. This morning, I got an email for Big Ten Media Days, and that's lingering, moving closer and closer and closer every day I think about it. So it's looming like a black cloud right now, and it probably will be. And whether Pat Fitzgerald is there or not, or another representative from Northwestern is there, whoever it is going to be forced to answer a lot of difficult questions. And it's just not going to be a pleasant time in Indianapolis for them
or for really anybody wearing a Wildcat purple, it's not going to be a fun time to be in Indianapolis, because every single one of them is going to be peppered with questions like this and not actual football.
We got Chris back on the line here. Chris, welcome back into Hail Varsity Radio, and go ahead. What do you have for us today?
Hey, thanks. Great show. Well, I mean, this just continues to happen in the Big Ten, which is a great female conference, but we don't win anything in the men's sports except for wrestling. So it's just disheartening to see this continue to happen. Penn State, Iowa, Northwestern, you got to begin to question what the heck's going on in the Big Ten. You know, I mean, why? And not even the better schools. You know, Penn State doesn't win nothing. Iowa is second rate. Northwestern wins one game. And, you know, we're not like a big conference where we have, you know, Michigan or, you know, Ohio State has a chance to win a championship every now and again. But, you know, otherwise, nobody's won anything for 25, 30 years. So, you know, what's going on? You know, why can't we get competitive teams at a national level? And even worse, how come, you know, we can't win? And even more, we're degenerate. You know, this is going on in the Big Ten. You know, I mean, I haven't seen this in the SEC where this is reported, as it is in the Big Ten the last 10 years, 8 to 10 years. I mean, maybe the culture of the Big Ten is just rotten.
It's an interesting way to put it, and I don't think you can paint with such a broad brush to say the Big Ten is broken in this way, but it is interesting the regionality that it seems to be prevalent here. And Chris, we thank you for the phone call today. But you asked, like, why are the results in the field suffering? Well, maybe it's because stuff like this is happening off the field. Yeah, well, and I will also say both Michigan and Ohio State are playoff teams, and Penn State just comes off a Rose Bowl team. So, I mean, that's there is some degree of success there. But, yes, they have fallen short of the national championship for some time. But there's also, I mean, look what's happening in the Georgia football program now and its culture. Certainly, it's a different situation. Different kind of culture issue.
And you can't compare the two, but they're not without controversy right now, and Kirby Smart's not without questions having to answer with SEC media days coming up. And certainly now with Auburn, with the hire of Hugh Freeze. Hugh Freeze's hiring came with a myriad and numerous questions that had to become from it. And then you follow Jimbo Fisher and his issues and his hiring of Bobby Petrino, who has a checkered past himself and has questions asked. So it's completely understandable where you know the call comes from in the attitude and mindset, or in the perception of it, especially with the totality and the horridness of the allegations here at Northwestern and then at Penn State, you know, 10, 12 years ago. Time gets away from me. But there is also controversy, and there is definitely some ownership that needs to be had with SEC programs. It's just not at this level, or it's just a different kind of bad at this point. But I don't know, it's college football.
You have 118 to 22-year-olds in a locker room, and it takes a special kind of person to be able to rein that in and control that and get the best out of those people, as opposed to stuff like this happening. So I don't want to say this is just a Big Ten issue. You have different kinds of culture issues all over the country because of how difficult the job that is.
Well, look at Baylor.
Yeah.
Look at Baylor not too long ago. I mean, that was a serious issue too, and one would say that it's a serious issue because it transcended the football program and it went onto the actual campus of the university. And the football coach and an investigation found out the athletic director actively behaved in a way that was inconducive to the investigation and in a way of stifling that culture itself.
We go to Dave in Geneva here before we get out. And Dave, we're up against a shot clock here. We only got about 60 seconds on the clock. What do you got for us today?
My question is, when did this begin? Was this something that was going on at Northwestern when Fitzgerald took the job? Did this happen under his tenure? When did it begin? I think that's a question that needs to be asked.
And there was some information, Dave, appreciate the call today, from that story on alleging racism from some former players, where they confirmed that a car wash existed during their time. What was been known as running, those players were not aware of. So it seems this kind of has been going on for a while, and it's progressed into something that's become worse through the years. But I don't think we have a firm start date. Maybe through the course of this investigation, we will learn a little bit more on how long this has been going on for. But at the moment, not completely sure. We'll continue on its conversation. It's Hail Varsity Radio on a Monday, presented by Currency.
And now, back to Hail Varsity Radio.
Continuing on here on a Monday edition of Hail Varsity Radio, we're presented by Currency. Elijah Herbel and Brady Oltmans taking you through the show today. As Schmitty, one more day off. You'll be back on a Tuesday edition of Hail Varsity Radio tomorrow from 4 to 6. But we're keeping first hour open here as we've had plenty to get into with the allegations coming out surrounding the Northwestern football program. We've taken a couple of calls already this hour about these allegations and what they mean for the Big Ten. It really is a bombshell to the Big Ten world over the weekend, just how surprising some of these stories are. If you want to give us a call, give us your thoughts, 402-489-1240. And you can also give us a call anywhere across the state, 800-825-5865. So those are the two numbers again, 402-489-1240. 800-825-5865. Give us a call. We'll get you on the line. We'll get your thoughts here on Hail Varsity Radio. Give us a tweet, too, at Herbal Essences for me, Elijah Herbel, at Brady Oltmans for Brady, who's the man sitting across the glass from me. And Brady, I don't want to spend too much time here on this Northwestern football story. It's very, very important, but there's plenty of Husker news that we really ought to get into from this weekend as well, and primarily I'm thinking of Husker baseball, and there are 3 players that have now been drafted. It was 2 yesterday, and a third, Emmett Olson, going off the board today, as it was Brice Matthews getting picked up near the end of the first round, 28th overall pick to the hometown Houston Astros, as Brice Matthews is going to stay home, if you will, and develop as a member of the Houston Astros. I think that is just an awesome, awesome opportunity for him. As for Max Anderson, a Detroit Tiger he will be, and I think the current scouting report is we're unsure exactly where he's going to end up. Brice Matthews, I think we're assuming an outfield role is where it's going to be for him, and the power with his bat really negates some of the issues he had defensively at the shortstop position this season. As for Max Anderson, he really developed into a solid option as a second baseman. I think MLB teams like the versatility of where they can put him in the infield, and they like the bat as well. And then Emmett Olson, a little bit earlier this afternoon, he got picked up by the Miami Marlins, so he is going to be a pitcher in the Miami Marlins organization, going to try to get a call up to the show here in the next couple of years, following in the footsteps of some notable former Huskers as well. Yeah. But the first place my mind went was just how, I don't want to call it surprising because we saw the talent of Brice and Max all year long, but it breaks a streak dating back to 1995 of multiple Huskers being picked in the first 3 rounds of an MLB draft. Last time it happened was when 2 Huskers went in the first round, the first being Darren Erstad back in that 1995 draft, as he went first overall also to the Houston Astros. But it's been since 1995 the Husker baseball has had multiple guys go in the first 3 rounds of the draft, and it's been since 2011 that the 3 major men's sports at Nebraska, either of them, football, basketball, or baseball, have produced a first-round talent. That streak ended with Brice Matthews, 12 years between Prince Mukamara and Brice Matthews, ending the streak of Huskers not being picked in the first round. And Brady, whenever you hear that stat, it's not necessarily surprising, but it's jarring to hear it put in that way, that it's been 12 whole years, meaning the current crop of kids who are going into their senior year of high school were going into first grade last time Nebraska had a first-round pick in any of the 3 major sports. And whenever you put it like that, it puts some things into perspective, just with some of the failures across the 3 major men's sports at Nebraska over 12 years, and credit to Brice Matthews for being the guy to break that streak.
Yeah, I mean, you and I were talking before. It's it really doesn't feel like it was that long ago. You know, when you think about Prince and watching him play, and I think we've all, especially if you're at a certain age, you've all seen Nebraska football and Nebraska men's baseball all be successful, and you've all seen them compete at an extremely high level. And for some people, to me, sometimes we just forget how long ago that really was. Mm-hmm. And now you see, and I think part of it, what stings a little bit about this one is clearly Nebraska had some great players this last season. I mean, clearly, and you see it, it's validated now, but you saw it throughout the spring. And when they played well, they could play with anybody. You know, I mean, they go up to Minnesota in one of the first weekends of the season, and they perform well, and they're staring down teams that fought well towards Omaha. You know what I mean? But they just couldn't get it done. And I think that's one thing that really sticks with this is even when you have 2 picks in your top 3 rounds of the MLB draft, and you've got another, and one of your top pitchers gets drafted not long after, you kind of wonder, well, then how did you do? And it just was an extremely underwhelming season as a whole for Husker baseball. And that's what sticks in my mind, because it's across those 3 men's sports, you just kind of see, I don't want to just chalk it all up to one thing, because a multitude of things factor into all of them. But at some point, you almost think that it's almost institutional, and that at a certain point, the infrastructure of Nebraska athletics over its revenue sports just didn't factor in that same attention to detail, or the resources weren't there, or something was different. Because while that was happening, Nebraska volleyball is still successful. The rifle team is still successful. The bowling team is still successful. The wrestling team and Mark Manning are still competing at a really high level. The soccer team is still successful and competitive. There's just other teams, and gymnastics also. I don't want to fall into the same trap of don't individually name people, otherwise you will forget somebody. But there are other sports that were extremely successful during that stretch. So you can't just chalk it up to the entire athletic department. But those 3 sports in particular stand out. Of there's just been something shortcomings there, and then I think you're seeing it now that there is some sort of correcting to the record, and there is that attention to detail being paid now that might not have been placed there over the last decade.
And one of the things that stands out to me here when you kind of discuss some of these failures is you mentioned the fact that the Husker baseball team, they didn't live up to expectations this year. Whenever you think about it, you go back to 1995, the last time Nebraska had multiple players selected in the first 3 rounds of the MLB draft. You had super regional teams since then. You had College World Series teams since then. You had some of the best teams in Husker baseball history during that time. They didn't have multiple players selected in the first 3 rounds. Nebraska this year, they do. And I understand baseball is a team sport. 2 guys aren't going to be able to carry you to success. But you would think at least making a regional, at least making postseason, at least being a decent seed in the Big Ten tournament, which is among the quote-unquote Power 5 conferences, probably the worst baseball conference in America, you're not able to make any noise despite having a first-round guy, a second-round guy, a great pitcher in Evan Olson. It's a head-scratcher.
Yeah.
It's a head-scratcher. And we saw changes to the Husker baseball staff with Jeff Christie being let go, and the promotion of
Rob Childress.
Rob Childress, thank you.
You're
My mind
welcome.
went blank for a second there.
I know
as there's been some changes, but you just sit there and wonder, why was Husker baseball unable to get across that line and reach a point of at least respectability? Because whenever you're losing to Creighton, whenever you're losing to UNO, you had enough talent to be not only the best team in the state, but really a best team in the region.
Yeah, and they lost to North Dakota State, too.
Lost to North Dakota State.
Well, and I'm sure, and we will hear from Will Bolt on Wednesday. He has a scheduled media appearance on Wednesday, so we'll get some more answers on, I'm sure he'll talk about the draft picks and everything, but I'm sure some of those questions will turn to on the field product and winning or not. But it's, I don't know, man. You got to have it turned around. And I go back to Will Bolt saying the goal at the beginning of the season was to host a regional. Rather, months later, they're fighting and scoreboard watching to see their place in the Big Ten tournament. Something fell short there, and we're going to have some ownership to determine who's responsible for those shortcomings.
Now your mind goes to, you have to improve your roster next year. You have to get better, and you're losing your 2 best players.
Yeah.
More on Varsity Radio continues after the break. 3 minutes away. It's Elijah Herbel, Brady Oltmans.
And now,
back to Hail Varsity Radio.
Wrapping up hour 1 here of Hail Varsity Radio, we are presented by Currency, Elijah Herbel and Brady Oltmans. We spent the majority of hour 1 discussing the allegations coming out against Pat Fitzgerald and the Northwestern football team. Spent a little bit of time here at last segment discussing Huskers in the MLB draft and some of the failures of the 3 major men's sports at Nebraska within the past decade or so. And I want to keep it with a local flair here, Brady, because this is really, really cool, at least for me. Lincoln Southeast product Logan Van Treek. He's been drafted in the 9th round of the MLB draft. He goes to the Cincinnati Reds after a collegiate career at Lipscomb. And this is cool for me because Logan was a guy, he was always in the weight room when I was at Southeast. He was, I believe, let's do the math here, 2 years below me. One of those guys that was a baseball freak. I mean, he was 6'5" as a sophomore, and he knew, this kid's got a chance to be a real pitcher. overlooked a little bit by Nebraska during his time at Lincoln Southeast. That's something you could get into, but that's not where I want to start. I just want to give congratulations off to him because he's had a hell of a journey through his baseball career. I haven't remained in touch all that much, but I've tried to follow his career being in sports media. And he's a guy that really, really struggled his junior year of college, where he was, I think, had an ERA over 10, couldn't seem to find the strike zone. And then only 1 year later, he made some games, especially to the mental side of what he did on the mound. He posted a 3.67 ERA his senior year, 108 strikeouts to just 14 walks over 88 innings, and all that hard work pays off as he's a 9th-round selection of the Cincinnati Reds, and within the past 5 years now, 2 Lincoln Southeast Knights have been drafted into the MLB Draft. It was Nolan Hoffman from Texas A&M in the 5th round, I believe back in 2019, and then now you have Logan Van Treek, the 2023 MLB Draft. As I try to remain unbiased here, but as a former Lincoln Southeast Knight, that just makes my heart swell to see a kid like this who had a wealth of talent, was great on the mound, got a little bit overlooked in the college recruiting process. He kind of proves everybody wrong, goes off, gets drafted by the Cincinnati Reds, and he's going to be a professional baseball player. I think that's just probably one of the coolest things I've seen today.
Man, I tell you what, though, that's one of the things I really love about baseball is it's, covering recruiting and football recruiting, you have some of those kids that are like a Carter Nelson, for example, legitimately thought, am I going to be noticed if I stay here at Ainsworth? I could go somewhere else and make sure I get noticed. And he stayed, and cream rises to the top. People pay attention to you. I can tell you from covering high school sports out in Wyoming, nobody thought Brandon Nimmo, a guy from Cheyenne, would get a shot somewhere. But then, if you're good enough, people are going to see you. And now he's making quite a bit of money starting in that outfield for the Mets. And seeing now, watching my brother's teams play, and you've got guys from Doane get drafted into the MLB. You've got, or even some of them have transferred now, and they're playing D1. Their closer last year transferred to Kansas and was closing Big 12 games. Like, it's just these college athletes and these college programs just scout so well at that level to get you. And even if you're like, if you don't. You're not an early bloomer, or like it takes you a while to really mature in your body and mind, like regardless of where you are, collegiate wise, JUCO, wherever, if you're a good ball player, they're going to find you. And these MLB teams are going to scout you. They're going to ring you up, and they're going to bring you in, and it's regardless of where you're at. And that's one of the things that makes baseball great and this whole thing great. So yeah, props to be done, and props to every other, UNO Creighton kid that's going to get drafted in the MLB, or even just native Nebraskans. Like, shout out Spencer Reach, shout out. Like, these are cool times, and you're going to be found out if you're a good enough ball player.
And like days like today, this is days that dreams are realized, and I know Logan is probably overjoyed as he's going to be off to the Cincinnati Mets. That's awesome. Local talent, stand up. That's just great news. We'll continue on with Hail Varsity Radio after the break. Hour 2 rolls forward. A Blackshirt Hour, Charlie McBride and Jay Moore.
The voice of Husker Nation is on the air. This is Hail Varsity Radio. Insight, opinion, expertise, along with the biggest names talking Nebraska sports. Join in with the show at 402-489-1240 or 1-800-825-5865. Now, here are your hosts, Chris Schmidt and Elijah Herbel.
Back in on a Monday edition of Hail Varsity Radio. We're into Hour 2 as we're presented by Currency. Elijah Herbel and Brady Oltmans taking you through this show today. And despite the fact that Schmitty's not here, the show must go on, literally. And the show goes on now with Coach Charlie McBride joining us for his usual Monday segment. Charlie was kind enough to give us a couple minutes out of his Friday. We didn't get a chance to sit down with him last week because of the 4th of July holiday. So we got a brief sit down with Charlie on Friday. We're going to get a full Charlie McBride experience here, and I remind you, if you have any questions for Charlie, you can leave a comment on our YouTube stream as a part of our Ask Charlie segment. Let us know what you want to ask Coach. You can also send us a tweet at Herbal Essences for me, at Brady Oltmans for the man sitting across the glass from me, Brady Oltmans. And you can send a tweet to at HVarsity Radio. All of those are great ways where we will see your questions. So if you have a question as a part of a Ask Charlie segment, we will get to that towards the end of our interview here today with Charlie. But without further ado, let's welcome the man to the show. It's Charlie McBride with us here on Hail Varsity Radio. And Coach, it's only been 4 days since we last chatted, which feels a little bit different. How was the weekend? I know you had some stress with a dog last time we talked to you, barking and wanting to go inside and outside. How was that this weekend, and how are you doing on a Monday?
Well, the weekend was good, and it's starting to thin out a little bit. We got a couple of them went home, and their girlfriends went home, and their mothers came and picked them up, and they're going to drive. They're going to drive back to Arizona and have a great time, I'm sure. It'll be hot. I wish they didn't want to leave, but it's going to thin out. By the end of the month, we'll be sitting here with just Debbie and I.
Well, it's Charlie McBride with us here on a Monday edition of Hail Varsity Radio, as Charlie's house getting a little bit more quiet by the day, and we're happy for Charlie for that. But Charlie, let's dive right into it. The big talking point today has been what can really only be called... Charlie, you still with us? The call's dropped.
I'm telling you, man.
Something with these phone lines today.
It's a Monday for everybody, you know what I mean?
Including the phone service, as I'm going to work to get Charlie back on the line here. Let's see. Do we have a talking point for Brady in the meantime?
Talking point for me. I don't know. It's been, I tell you what though, in terms of phone lines, it's been difficult to get people to call me back right now. You know, it's still the summer and weird times, coaches, but we'll have some more stuff in the works. Loyal Hail Varsity subscribers, we got stuff in the works for you. So just keep your subscriptions going.
And remember, you can always go to hailvarsity.com/offer for a monthly or yearly subscription to Hail Varsity magazine. As we have Charlie McBride back here on the line. I was doing double duty there, calling him and talking. It's why they pay me the big bucks. So welcome Charlie back into the show. Charlie, I think our call dropped. You're back with us. You can hear us just fine now, correct?
Yeah.
Well, Charlie, let's dive right into the football news of the day then, as the big talking point has been what seems to be a lack of control over the Northwestern football program from Pat Fitzgerald, at least allegedly. We have some reports out there from some players who have come forward to report hazing in the locker room, and some of the details of this hazing is highly concerning, if not disturbing, because of its sexual in nature, and really feels like it's left some lasting impressions on some of the freshmen and people throughout that Northwestern football program. And I want to ask you, the question that we had back in hour one that still remains to be seen is just how much did Pat Fitzgerald know about the happenings of his locker room? Is he intentionally turning a blind eye? Does he truly not know? And I want to get your experience as a guy who was like boots on the ground in a very high-level locker room. Is it possible for a coaching staff to know the full ins and outs of what's going on a daily basis inside a locker room whenever you're trying to manage 100 guys between the ages of 18 and 22?
Well, I've known Pat since he was in high school, and in fact, I tried to recruit him. I've known his family and know where he came from, and he was straight as he could get, all through as far as I'm concerned. I'm really kind of shocked at what happened, on my side, just because of my past, knowing him and knowing how hard he's worked. And but, sometimes coaches, hit a panic button, and I don't know whether that was it or what the whole story is on the thing. But Pat is I believe it may be a little bit because he's never had any anything thrown at him like this before, and I think maybe it's something that sometimes comes up, and then all of a sudden you hear the AD saying, well, we need to go in a different direction. And from what I know of people who have been ADs who have spoken at clinics, that one of the ways they get rid of a coach or something is to start leaking different things. But, so that, I take it for kind of a grain of salt. I don't know that he hadn't gotten after his kids pretty good, but, when you start getting into some of that stuff, that isn't Pat.
Yeah, well, and Charlie, you, with your experience on the defense and your experience, as in part of Husker football as a whole, you saw so many, high school kids that you liked and recruited develop and come in as young, impressionable teenagers and leave Nebraska with a degree and, standout NFL players. I guess I'd be curious to hear from you in a coaching role. What are some of those steps or things that the coaching staff does to get those young freshmen integrated with the team to make sure that everybody is moving together as a collective team?
Well, I think a lot of it depends on your indoctrination when you come in, that that they know, they're told, that the older guys are going to work with them. A lot of kids think they're in a class system, like, the freshmen, you stand over here, all the walk-ons, you stand over there, and they, that kind of stuff. And we really worked hard at the older guys, eating with the younger guys, meeting them, make them feel part of this football team. And that's how you do it. I mean, if a young player feels confidence when he goes out, or is he scared to death to make a mistake that some of the older kids are going to get upset with him, or that kind of thing. And the other thing I think is a little bit different. I think in my mind, I always tried to teach him that you can always say, I don't understand. As you know, anybody knows, a young person, when a coach will say, now does everybody got it? And nobody will raise their hand, because it makes them feel everybody thinks they're dumb. Well, they're not, and they're in the same boat that you are and were, if you're a senior or junior. And the thing we have to do is to encourage them to say, I don't understand. And, so that we're all going on the field, we don't make mistakes and things like that. But I think it takes a lot of training from the head coach down to the position coaches, how they treat younger players. And we've always tried our best to integrate them, with don't make it obvious. Make it, that the older guys go up and say, hey, I'm Joe Smith, I'm glad to have you here, and so on and so forth. I mean, so that's kind of what we kind of pointed at.
Coach Shelley McBride with us here on Hail Varsity Radio. And Coach, this is a compliment to you, and it's a compliment to Pat Fitzgerald for the most part as well. You guys are both old school football coaches, and typically that's what works in the Big Ten. We had a caller call in last hour and mentioned the fact that with incidents like this, a lack of control over the locker room, it seems to be an issue that we've seen a lot within the Big Ten, and a lot more within the Big Ten as opposed to other conferences within the past couple of seasons. And is there an element to letting the locker room and letting the team be from an old school football sense that, hey, we're going to coach you, we're going to let you know what we expect from you, but also at the same time, it's important to let the guys be free whenever they're in a place that they consider safe, as in the locker room? What's the mentality towards how you treated locker room interactions?
I don't think I was in a locker room. I can think of once before a game, I went when I was young and wanted to hear Coach Osborne talk to the team. That was my point, though, at that time. After that, it was kind of, it's their place. We always thought that, I mean, this is their room and their space. There are occasions when you have to go in there, or you have to do something that, and it's very, very, I don't even remember going in other than something that I had to do, or, and I can't even think of, but I'm sure there was, a couple of times when I had to, or go talk. Now, after a game, I was in the locker room, and so were all the coaches. And the other thing is, talking about the locker room, and we're getting back to maybe the last question a little bit, we always made it a point, especially during preseason, the coaches went through the freshman locker room on the way to their locker room and so on to talk to the young freshmen and not just disappear. A lot of times the kid gets there and all of a sudden the coach that recruits him, or the coach, they've got to learn to meet the other coaches and get to know them well. So we always went in there, and the first guy we'd see, we'd sit, talk to him, see how he's doing, and try to make him feel comfortable.
Man, well, and it's I don't know, as a coach or as someone who can understand the coach's mentality or the coach's perspective, there seems like there's a lot of pressure now, and especially for a coach who could be in Pat Fitzgerald's position, and you spoke highly of him and his background and know him well. From a coach that could be in his position, there's so much stress and there's so much attention and paid to that position. Do you coach or do you behave any differently if you were to have that sort of pressures, as opposed to if you are more, I guess, comfortable, or if you are in a rhythm, so to speak, as a coach?
Well, if you really think about it, the way I kind of looked at it is that if you feel like you have a lot of pressure on you, then you're thinking of failing.
Yeah.
You're worried about failing. And that sure as heck isn't what you want to talk to the players about. And I think that, you really try to, you have to watch your words. You have to watch a lot of things that you're saying to them, because each kid is as different as his face. And so you say one thing, you may be hurting some other kid's feelings or something that he doesn't really like. So you kind of have, after a while, the better you know your players, the better it's all going to be. And the pressure part of it, comes from usually where the press tries to put the pressure on you, or fans, or whatever the case is. People say things and they try to develop you to a point where you're thinking about failing. And that's the way that teams usually go on the field. You get a lot of back talk on the field, guys talking to you back. And, to me, the best face you can have, no matter where you're on a football field or off, is a smile. And if you're in a position that a guy is giving you some grief, to smile at him and just keep your mouth shut and just go knock the snot out of him.
It's Charlie McBride with us here, Hail Varsity Radio. And Charlie, last thought here, let's switch gears here and talk Brice Matthews. As I'm not sure if you followed the MLB Draft last night, Charlie, but Brice Matthews going in the first round to the Houston Astros, and he's the first Husker across any of the three major men's sports to be drafted in the first round, dating back to 2011, ending a 12-year streak. And what is your reaction to the fact that it's been 12 years since Nebraska's had a player drafted in the first round up until last night?
Well, I tell you what, if you get drafted in the first round, you're special. Mm-hmm. I mean, there's a lot of work gone into checking you out. I mean, it's not just overnight. It's a thing where they go to every length they can go to find out about you. And if a team feels that way about you, it would make me feel good. And I think that's where and that's what they want. They want you to be part of it, but the coaches now, the upper echelon of people in the organization will try to really make you feel wonderful and you're the greatest thing in the world. And the coaches will be honest with you, and when you go in, no matter what sport it is, you got a lot to learn. I mean, you have a ton to learn, and so, I think most guys are really down to earth about being a first-round draft choice, not to let anybody down. I think that's really important that and that goes for every player, but a first-rounder just doesn't want to do it. I remember Neil Smith went in, and people thought he's it. He didn't make it. He played terrible. Well, he had a tendon that was not attached or didn't get attached over the year, and he played his first year with that tendon, and it really had problems in his leg. And then the second year, they found out, the fans, basically the coaches knew, but the fans found out, wow, this guy's the real deal. And so a lot of times, that's something you have to worry a little bit about. But nowadays, the medical people are so on top of everything that it's hard to, that to happen.
Charlie McBride with us here, Hail Varsity Radio. Charlie, appreciate your time here today. We're up against a hard break, but we'll get caught up with you next week. All right, bud?
Okay, I'll talk to you when we're older.
See you, Charlie.
Thanks a lot, guys.
All-State, 2-year starter, and rush in for the Big Red and NFL vet.
Is Dudeness or Duder or, El Duderino if you're not into the whole brevity thing.
It's Blackshirt Jay Moore with Hail Varsity Radio.
Back in here on a Monday edition of Hail Varsity Radio as the Blackshirt Hour continues. We welcome in former Blackshirt, former NFLer Jay Moore joins the show. Find him on Twitter at JMoore44. And Jay, we didn't get a chance to catch up last week as we were enjoying the 4th of July holiday. Did you enjoy your time away, and did you keep all 10 fingers?
Yep, 10 fingers, 10 toes still here. It was good. Spent some good time with the family. Made a quick pilgrimage, a quick trip over to Des Moines last weekend to take my 6-year-old son to see Dude Perfect. So that was pretty cool. Got to play a little golf and enjoy some time with family. And not too many fireworks on the 4th. We had that big storm that came through, but I'll tell you what, I wasn't too disappointed because it can get kind of chaotic in the neighborhood. It's still about midnight and you're trying to get some sleep. But that storm that came through kind of washed out some of that. So that was kind of nice. But yeah, it was good. It was a good time with family, and always looking forward to next year.
Again, Jay Moore's with us here, Hail Varsity Radio. And Jay, what the 4th of July always signifies to me is once you get through it, football season's right around the corner. And that's, again, this year. We're just a couple weeks away from Big Ten Media Days. Fall camp gets going, and before you know it, it's going to be Thursday night in Minneapolis, and Nebraska and Minnesota are going to get the season kicked off. And when you look at Big Ten Media Days only 2 weeks away, someone who is sure to have drama with their Big Ten Media Days is Pat Fitzgerald, as he'll be returning, we assume, from his 2-week suspension, assuming he doesn't get fired or resign before then. He'll have some questions to answer at Big Ten Media Days, and we've spent a good amount of time on the show today talking about the situation within Northwestern football, and this goes back to Friday whenever we got to spend some time discussing what we thought maybe was going on with Northwestern football, and over the weekend we got a much better, much clearer idea with some backed up stories from former Northwestern football players and Northwestern current football players about the culture and the situation within that locker room. I want to get your reaction to what was going on with Northwestern, because it was a culture that seemingly, allegedly promoted, I don't know what other way to put it besides just sexually gross behavior within a locker room in order to haze the younger players and make them a part of the football team and get them geared up for playing football. And everything about it just, I think, shocked not only me, but a lot of the Big Ten world, because Pat Fitzgerald's such a respected head coach in this conference. And it seems like his program would be the last program to have a lack of control over what's going on in the locker room. And I want to get your reaction to what we're seeing within Northwestern football. Are you surprised to see this still in college football? And how prevalent do you think this is within the world of college football?
Yeah, I mean, it was the stuff you read. It was slightly disturbing, just because. And again, I think nowadays you still have to take things with a grain of salt. I think there's still a lot of information to come out, and I always am concerned about motives of certain players. They might have an axe to grind against the university or Pat Fitzgerald, something like that, and he could potentially blow some things out of the water. But on the flip side of that, if this is true, it's not a good situation. I don't understand why guys would want to do this to other people. I think there's always some form of, I don't know if you want to call it hazing or just traditions, or things you do. You always have things that you always give freshmen, young people that come in hard times. When I was even in the NFL as a rookie, you had to carry veterans pads, you had to pay for dinners, you had to pick up food, you had to do a lot of things for them. It's just, that's always going to be there, especially at that level. And I think, and nowadays you got to be careful in college, especially when you're still dealing with young kids and the parents at home, and they're not grown men, and they haven't signed $1 million contracts and things like that. So very, if this is a true, clear picture that this, player, I don't know if he's still there or former player, is painting, it's not good. I sure as heck don't want to be put in that situation as a young player. I don't know why, as an older player, as a veteran player on that team, you'd want to do that to another human being. I don't understand that one bit. And as far as understanding what's going on, I think most head coaches know what's happening in their locker room, especially if it's going to that extent. If they're doing the things that was discussed in these articles, somehow you gotta find out that and put the kibosh on it and shut that thing down immediately. I think even when we were in college, we gave when Bill Callen was there, we tried to give the freshmen funny haircuts, and that got put the kibosh on too, just because you just don't want to break apart the team and try to have any ill will or negative effects to teammates or just whatever. You're trying to build a solid foundation for your team and for that year and going forward. And there's some trust and things like that. So even us doing that, which it still happens in NFL and other places, they got shut down rather quickly. So I find it very hard to believe that he did not know what is going on. If these things, if these actions, if these rituals, if these whatever it is, clapping above heads and all these certain things that signifies you're putting this guy on the list, that it's not good if they're true. It's not good for this football program. A very obviously successful and very academic-minded school that you go to Northwestern. It's that's right up there with the Ivy Leagues and the Stanfords and all that stuff. So I hope the right information comes out. I do respect Pat Fitzgerald as head coach. I think he's a phenomenal coach, and obviously was a great player there. And the things he's done at Northwestern with not a lot of talent has always impressed me with what he's done. But if these allegations and these stories come out and that they are true, that definitely puts a black eye on Pat Fitzgerald's career. And hopefully, the truth and it comes out here soon, and kind of we're able to move on and see what happens with this football program. But not the news I was expecting and was looking to read this past weekend when all these allegations came out.
Yeah, Jay, I mean, some of us, or we all here, kind of played football. One of us to a higher level than the other two here. But, going into, especially when you arrived at Nebraska, you're still a teenager arriving at a big stage in a big university, high profile, and then obviously going to the NFL. Can you kind of take us through just what the environment is like and how, a young, impressionable person, and what environment does a high school senior walk into when they become a college freshman at a Big Ten institution?
Yeah, it's vastly different than anything you've ever been a part of. You go from being in middle school and then you go into high school as a freshman, and I think in a majority of schools, your freshmen rarely play on the varsity level. Usually you're still part of a freshman team, whether that's at a basketball, baseball, or football. And then you bump up, whether that's to the JV or you go right to the varsity as a sophomore. Not as big of a culture shock or an adjustment for some people, but being a senior in high school, all of a sudden going to a Division I, a Big Ten, ACC, SEC school, whatever it may be, you were a big fish in kind of a small pond, and now you're a big fish in a huge pond with a lot of other ginormous fishes, and it's a very competitive environment, and I think it's supposed to knock you down a peg or two. It's a very humbling experience. It is. You are competing with guys who are 3-4 years older than you, guys who are much more mature, much more smarter, bigger, faster, stronger. It always amazes me when guys are able to come in as true freshmen, especially on the offensive line and defensive lines, and play as a freshman, because that's where the gaps are the biggest, in my opinion. a receiver, a running back, a safety, or a defensive back can play. Just physically not as big of a jump, but yeah, it's tough. It was very humbling for me. I redshirted my freshman year. When I got there, I was not ready to mentally or physically to play. I needed to become tougher physically and mentally. I needed to get my head kicked in for a couple of years on scout team to learn how to develop techniques and develop foundations, how to play with my hands and become tougher. You just got to be. It's a grind. College football's a grind, and it teaches you. You learn real quick if you want it or not, because those ones that don't, you're looking for something else to do, because it's not for the faint of heart. It's not easy, but it's nothing. I mean, the jump, I would say the transition from a 18-year-old senior going to college is a larger jump than I would say a senior going into the NFL. Not even. I don't even know if it's even comparable. Because you're caught up physically. You might not be caught up mentally to some of those players, but you still can compete physically. But you're so far behind physically and mentally as a senior high school coming to college that it's hard. It's hard for some kids, and then you put them in some situations where there's hazings or whatever there is, and that becomes a very uncomfortable situation for a lot of young men.
Jay Moore is with us here, Hail Varsity Radio, and Jay, I want to get your take on how somebody new, whether it be a freshman or a rookie in the NFL, how do they come into a locker room and earn the respect of the peers, the guys that have been there and the guys that are the real leaders within a football team? How do you come in and join that environment and reach a point where you're respected in that locker room?
Yeah, it's pretty simple. It's kind of about you kind of just show up on time, shut up, and work hard. Mm. The guys that have tough times adjusting is they come in thinking they're the best and they're going to talk it, and that makes it 10 times worse on guys, because they are moving targets now in practice. They're going to get hit harder. They're going to they're just going to take more crap from guys if when they're running their mouth all the time. You got to be on time. You can't be late. You can't be a young guy and always coming late to meetings. That's not going to happen. You got to work hard. A lot of the young guys come in and they're missing times and workouts and not doing what needs to get done. You just can't do that. You got to show up on time, shut your mouth, and work hard. And you do those three things, guys have no issues with that. It's just those guys that tend to run their mouth and then they get into workouts and they can't keep up, and you're just like, oh my gosh, what a joke this guy is. But every recruiting class probably has one or two of those guys every year that come in, and they get recognized and asterisk real quick, like in that process. But so many good players that I played with that came in as freshmen, and the good ones that's what they did. They showed up on time, they worked hard, and they kept their mouth shut. Those are three simple rules for incoming freshmen that should be seared in their brain when they come into any program, whether it's Division I, Division II, or NAI, whatever. Those are three good rules to live by.
Any of those things, the things you had to learn the hard way, Jay, or
No, gosh, no. Yeah, I'm not much of a talker, anyways. I'm not a very cocky human being. So keeping my mouth shut was not a problem. Showing up on time has never been a problem. Working hard, no. Those were never no issues with me. It's just I just had to become stronger in the weight room and tougher mentally to be able to play at that level. Just because you do nothing as in high school. Nothing gets you prepared for Division I college football. Not just the practices, the meeting times, just the time that you're spent to your football. I mean, it's a job, and football that might take up 3 hours of your day in high school, maybe, but during training camp, hell, you're there for 12 hours, and you're doing that for 2-3 straight weeks during training camp, or 4 weeks, and then class starts and all that stuff too. So it is a grind. So just trying to keep up was enough for me. My first year there.
Jay Moore is with us here at Hail Varsity Radio. A few more minutes here with Jay. And Jay, I want to switch gears from locker room in Northwestern and talk about the big news of the night last night, which is Brice Matthews. He's a first-round pick to the Houston Astros in the MLB Draft. And to kind of bring this back to football, what was shocking to me was this is Nebraska's first-round pick in any of the three major men's sports, that's football, basketball, and baseball, since Prince Amukamara in 2011. It's been 12 years in between first-round draft picks across any of the main sports. I just want to get your reaction. What does that mean to you? Because whenever I hear that doesn't feel like Nebraska and Nebraska athletics. It's about excellence and getting guys ready for the next level, and that starts with having great players. And I think this is evidence of something we've hit on plenty on this show, which is Nebraska hasn't had great players within the past decade, not only in football, but also in basketball and baseball. That's why you can look at the results on the field. But what is your overall reaction to the 12-year drought being ended of first-round draft picks?
Yeah, I saw that stat and was taken back a little bit, but just kind of shows you the struggles that the main three sports have gone through. I mean, obviously basketball's had their struggles for a very long time. Football has just been more as of lately, and in baseball, it's kind of been here or there. Just never had any major draft picks. We have plenty of guys that are playing in the MLB that have come through the last 6-7 years, but it just hasn't equaled baseball wise. We haven't won any regionals. I don't know when's the last super regional the Nebraska baseball team's been to. I don't know if it was in the early 2000s with the Alex Gordon teams and Jabba Chamberlain teams. You can correct me if I'm wrong, but nothing's coming to my mind. And then obviously, football team, that being a bowl game the last 6 years. Basketball teams obviously struggles, with, not making a NCAA tournament or not winning an NCAA tournament game. But I hopefully that's going to switch here real quick. I think there's some guys that, speaking to football, that have some abilities to hopefully change that in the next couple of years. But you got to start winning. And I think teams, and more football in general, teams are always going to want to draft guys from successful programs. I think you could look at some guys that maybe played at Alabama that were maybe in the later first rounds, they got drafted. I guarantee you if they were at a struggling Nebraska or a struggling Vanderbilt, they're not a first-round draft pick. You got to come back to scouts and general managers and head coaches want guys from winning teams because it's all synonymous with what happens from every organization. You have great leadership, you're a hard worker, you have attention to detail, you're a respectable human being, you do the things the right way, you're a good person. You don't find those people on bad teams for the most part. So if we can just get back to more winning ways, not only in football but the other programs, you're going to start seeing draft picks. I don't think it's going to take much. Nebraska starts, chunking off 7, 8, 9, wins a year. You're going to start getting some better draft picks. That's just how it's going to go, and I think it always will be that way.
Yeah, and this football, I guess specifically, this coaching staff, their ability to recruit at a high level and reach people at a high level, and then, to your point, just that the proof that winning can happen, because for a lot of these young kids, they don't know, they haven't seen Nebraska win at the stage that you guys performed at, and that a lot of Husker fans are familiar with. I think just showing that proof of success can be viable at Nebraska, and if you become a Husker, you can do it, and you can meet the same level of success as those now pros. I think some kids they're ready to believe certain things, but some of them they need that proof, that evidence, and just get the ball rolling a little bit, enough to get them to buy in, and then that kind of compiles, right?
It absolutely does. This team has a lot of scar tissue to work through. I think there's always an instance of when the crap hits the fan, you go back mentally. It's just how we are as humans. You're like, okay, here we go again, because that's happened a lot more times than not here in the last decade. Unfortunately, there's a lot of times the crap's hit the fan. Too many times we've lost football games. So they're gonna have to learn how to win. They're gonna have to learn to battle through those times where you're like, oh boy, here we go again. But you got to mentally shut your brain off and not go there, and work through it. and stay focused on, your alignment and your assignment, and just play football. And I think that's what the good teams do. They're able to almost they can just kind of shut their mind off from the scoreboard. Let your coaches handle that. Let the coordinators call the plays. Let them pay attention to what's going on in the game. But situationally, man, you just got to just do what's called. If a certain defensive play is called, do your job. Is a certain offensive play is called, do your job, and do it to your best of your ability, and do it just like how you're coached to do it in practice. And that's just the process that you have to kind of work through as a not successful football program to become successful again. You just got to really just rip it apart, and you got to break it down, and that's where you start. You just got to, but it starts practicing the right way. So, in games, you're always going to fall back in your practice, and that's how you build this thing back up to where it needs it to go. It just comes down to doing your job every single play, whether it's play 1 or play 85. It's doing it to your best of your ability in the best way you are coached in practice. And yeah, you're not going to be perfect every time, but the good ones are able to forget the negative plays and just look to the next play and bounce back. And if you did screw up, go make a better play. Go force a fumble. Go break a tackle for a first down. Go make a great toe dragging catch on the sideline, whatever it may be, to kind of redeem yourself from those negative plays that might have happened, the series before.
Jay, last thought here before we get you out. About 30 seconds left. One of the most interesting on-the-run sagas has ended. Chiefsaholic, legendary Chiefs superfan who wore the Wolves costume. He's been placed back behind bars, and this is something I think Brady and I might get into here in just a little bit. But Chiefsaholic behind bars. As a Broncos fan, I'm going to refrain from making any jokes about Chiefs fans. But, Jay, is this something you have followed? Or are you happy to see Chiefsaholic back behind bars?
I saw something mentioned on it. I'm not a Chiefs fan. I am a very loyal, I'm a very loyal wherever Zach Taylor is coaching at fan. So right now we're very strong Bengals fans. If Zach somehow becomes a head coach after Andy Reid at Kansas City Chiefs, I'll be a Kansas City Chiefs fan. But no, I don't. No, I haven't seen too much on it. But there's a lot of obviously Chiefs fans around here. I know that, and bandwagons or whatever you want to call them. But it's always funny to hear things like that happen. But I'm a Bengals guy through and through. So hopefully I'm guessing they'll have a chance to go up against me here and hopefully knock them off again in Kansas City like they did 2 years ago.
It's Jay Moore with us here on Hail Varsity Radio. Find him, follow him on Twitter at JMoore44. And Jay, appreciate your time here on a Monday afternoon. We'll get caught up with you next week. And until then, enjoy the rest of your week, okay?
Yeah, you got it. Thanks, boys.
Yeah.
So a big thank you to Jay Moore for joining us here on a Monday edition of Hail Varsity Radio. So yeah, Brady, Chiefsaholic back behind bars. He's been arrested in California. And if you guys don't remember this story, it was big news. He funded his NFL fandom traveling around watching the Chiefs by robbing banks across the Midwest. So he'd drive during the week to games, and during the midweek, he would rob banks in order to fund himself into NFL tickets on the weekend, which, respect, I guess. I mean, I don't recommend, but if you're that diehard that you got to get in there, I guess where there's a will, there's a way.
Yeah, I guess you deserve some headlines if you're able to put your body and your livelihood on the line like that. I guess you deserve to wear the Wolves gear for something like that.
A modern-day Bonnie and Clyde story, I guess. We'll wrap up a Monday edition of Hail Varsity Radio after the break. Elijah Herbel, Brady Oltmans back in 3 minutes.
And now,
back to Hail Varsity Radio.
One final time here on a Monday, it's Hail Varsity Radio. We're presented by Currency. A big thank you to Brady Oltmans, who's been sitting in with me on the show today. You can find and follow Brady on Twitter at Brady Oltmans. That's where you find all his work. You can also check him out on HailVarsity.com and his work with Eric Francis, the Eye Test podcast. Check that out on the Hail Varsity YouTube page or wherever you get podcasts. As it's a roughly weekly episode.
Yeah, we try to make it weekly or bi-weekly. We try to record, get things lined up, but it comes out about every week or every 2 weeks, depending. And then, about 2 weeks now, but we're hoping to go weekly into the football season and make it a little bit more, less big picture stuff and more focusing on the weekly churn of Husker football as a new season and new era begins this fall.
Yeah, a quick note, Brady, before we get you out of here is the Texas flair has been real with Nebraska, and there's a Texas coach in town. You see Joey McGuire made a stop in Lincoln visiting his son Garrett after Garrett really put in work all month of the entire month of June on the recruiting trail. Gets a visit from Dad now in July before both of their schedules ramp up significantly.
Yeah, and I remember talking with Joey not too long ago for my yearbook story, and he was really hoping to get up to Lincoln this summer to go see Garrett, and they're hopeful. They're hopeful to see some games this year. It's going to be tough with the Texas Tech schedule and everything like that, but they're going to try to, him and Debbie, his wife, are going to try to watch some Husker games in person if they can. That might include the trip to Minneapolis, but I know that they'd like to see a home game when they can, if schedules allow. So it'll be a big one for the McGuire family this fall. Give me a Texas Tech versus Nebraska home-and-home series. Brother, let's go. The last time I've been in Lubbock was a while ago, and I've heard it's in a little bit better shape now. So I'd be excited for that. And I mean, shoot, you're going to have two competitive, two scrappy teams going at it in a future home and home. That'd be a lot of fun. And a story I was reading, it's probably about a month, maybe two ago now, was that Joey and Garrett actually text back and forth and send each other recruits. They're like, well, the quote was from Joey. It was like we're all about making sure kids find the right stop. If that's at Nebraska and that's not with me, it's okay. Like we care about the kids. We want to make sure they have a good college experience and they find the right place for them. So we're not going to be secretive and say this is our kid. We want to make sure if a kid deserves to have opportunities to go elsewhere, that he at least gets to check him out. And it's kind of cool to see that father and son connection, that despite the fact that you are competitors, you're still sending back and forth and saying, like, hey, this kid's something special. You should check him out. He's flying under the radar. Yeah, I believe Malika Scara is one of those examples of that. I think Joey McGuire and Texas Tech scouted him well, and then he was a kid that got up on Nebraska's radar during one of those satellite camps, and then Nebraska offered and brought him in for a visit. And I believe that I'm not sure when he's scheduled to make his announcement. I want to say it's within the next week, but Texas Tech and Nebraska are both in his top 5. So it's already kind of paying off for both schools as they go forward. So, Brady, before we get you out of here, a chance to plug your work on the writing side of things. Guys, got you a chance on the podcast side. What's coming up from you and HailVarsity.com, Hail Varsity Magazine? I know it's a busy time as July ramps up and we get ready for fall camp. Yeah, well, just kind of working on kind of recaps on certain things. Some players, coaches, admins will go on and give updates, and I'll kind of write about their updates, their words. I've tried to go through, see some pivotal games from Matt Rule's career and revisit those right before positional breakdowns and stuff, kind of lead into media days and everything. Hopefully not anything as serious as the breaking news now that Pat Fitzgerald is indeed out. He's out as Northwestern's head coach. We'll get more reaction to that 4 to 6 tomorrow's Hail Varsity Radios. It's late breaking news. We spent all day talking about it. Pat Fitzgerald officially out. That's why you listen to the radio, folks. 2 hours. All the lead up and leave your guessing for tomorrow. It's breaking news, fine as it gets. Elijah Herbel, Brady Oltmans signing off. We'll talk to you tomorrow from 4 to 6.